All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon again. I'm Jim Gearing, I'm the fire chief, and I am relatively new to the city. I've been here for 4 months, came in November, and it's been a pleasure. It really has been great, not only to be honored and named as the fire chief of Forest Grove, but to be welcomed. So much hospitality and so much friendliness, and you can really feel it from our residents, our community members, and our business owners, and certainly our staff at the fire department and our staff of managers and directors at the city, who I'm joined by today. And before I get started, it's so great to hear about the activities that Rotary is putting on in our community. So congratulations on that, and thank you. And as far as the silent auction, how does a dinner and ride at the firehouse sound?
Oh, that sounds good.
Okay, great. So I'll give you my card here after a little bit. It should be fun. We have a great group of people, and whoever wins that auction is going to have a great time. So we're here to talk about Measure 343112. That's the Community Services Levy Replacement. And this levy first passed in 2002. It's passed 4 times. 2 of those times, the amount has been increased. This levy partially funds core services for police, fire, parks, recreation, and the library. And about 80% of this levy supports fire and police. So here we'll take a look at the levy existing and the levy proposed. The existing levy that we're currently under started July 1st, 2017. This levy will cease to exist on June 30th of 2023, so a little bit more than a year from now. And then the proposed levy would take place on that July 1st of 2023 and continue on for 5 years until June of 2028. This existing levy, the rate is $1.60 per $1,000 of assessed value. The proposed rate would be 35 cents more, $1.95 for every $1,000 of assessed value. The current levy contributes $3.1 million a year, again, to police, fire, parks, recreation, and the library. The proposed would increase by about $1.2 million to $4.3 per year to fire, police, parks, recreation, and library. And again, approximately 80% of that levy, the existing and proposed, will go towards those same services for fire and police. Now I'm going to turn it over to our police chief, Chief Ryman.
So if you look at the chart here, you'll see that our general fund equates to about $21 million plus some change. And the levy covers approximately 14% of our general fund. So the general fund obviously covers all the operations within the city. However, 80% of our general fund goes towards police and fire. I probably think that's a pretty big lift on our side of. But with that said, is we're driven a lot by personnel, wages, and expenses, to include equipment, other type of things like the fire truck costs a lot of money and so forth. But we're really driven by personnel costs. So again, you can see that the fire receives about 4.4 in their budget, and police is about 6.6 million.
No, it's not. No, we don't need to do that. No, please don't do that. No.
Are they not seeing that homework?
They just said the slides weren't advancing. But it looks like it's working now.
Okay.
No, you're gonna get my pants off.
So if the levy passes, what will happen is the average homeowner will see about an $82 increase over the years. So that would go about $455 on the average cost of the house. And I know Paul's in the audience. I don't know what the scale we're using on the median remote house costs or value.
$233,000 average system.
And again, this increase is based on the long-term needs and staffing needs of all the departments that fall under the levy. This one's yours, or is this one mine?
Oh, that's fine, yeah. All right, so if the levy fails, property tax revenue would decline about 3.1 million a year. And that would lead to fewer firefighters, police officers, parks and library staff, and recreation and library programs. So the next slide, thank you. This is going to focus on fire and rescue. So for the last 4 years, this chart shows our total calls, which have increased by about 10%. And that's pretty significant when you're talking about fire service and fire delivery and calls for service annually. 10% increase is up there. That's a lot. The increase in calls has resulted in a lower response reliability. So what is that? Response reliability really talks about our ability, our availability and reliability to service our own calls. So when the call volume starts to go up, that makes the department less able or reliable to service the next call that comes in. And again, with the 10% increase in calls, that is affecting our reliability and availability. In Forest Grove, this kind of gives you an idea of our calls for service and the volume that we have. Pound for pound, most calls per firefighter we have the most calls per firefighter in Washington County. So this house here on Ash Street is really busy. It's a very busy house. They average about 10 or 11 calls per day. And I can tell you, after 35 years in the fire service, that's a lot. That's a lot of calls to rely on one firehouse and one response team to service that amount of calls. So our response times, is shown here, has increased 5.5% over the past 3 years. So in this case, an increase is a bad thing, right? You want your bank account to increase, right? Stock market increase, but you don't want your response time to increase. You want to see a decline in your response times. And we're seeing a 5.5% increase. So our response reliability fell 83% compared to the industry standard of 95%. So what does that mean? So for example, TVF&R, they are using as a benchmark 95%. So they have a unit that has reached the 95% ability to respond to their own calls. So they have fallen to 95%. That's their benchmark to start looking at ways to improve service at their fire department. By comparison, in Forest Grove, we're at 83%. So we're well beyond that benchmark where we should start looking at ways to provide better service that were more reliable and better available to service our calls. Okay, if the levy passes, we're going to add firefighters to enable staffing for 2 emergency vehicles at once at the same time. And I'm pretty confident to say that although we're saying 2, I know that there are going to be times we can staff 3 and 2 for sure. And that's going to really help our availability and our reliability to service our own calls. The increased response reliability and decreased response times, and then improve employee recruitment and retention. And again, being around the fire service for a long time, I know that firefighters are interested in working for departments that have great equipment, a good safety program, benefits and pay are always something, but they also want to work for a department that is not just running the wheels off of their equipment and running on calls. They want to run on calls and actually make an impact in the community. And this levy, this proposed levy would increase our service, make us a better department, and attract more fire recruits to our department, make them interested in us. And now I'm going to turn it over, I think, back to Chief Ryan.
So before we get to the slide, the police, like the fire side, we do our workload study in a lot of similar fashion. Just depending on response times, type of calls, amount of officers going to calls, duration on the call, as well as report writing, those type of things. So we're looking at the stats. I'll kind of fill some of that in as I explain the slides. So during the past levy period, our overall calls increased by 12%. That includes everything, property one calls, two calls, self-initiated, and so forth. But the amazing part, what we saw were that our emergency calls, our true priority one calls, life and death type issues or threats to bodily harm or to property have increased by 37%. You will know that, you can't see that in 2020 we had an anomaly. COVID played a significant part in regards to the type of calls we would take. We really reduced our self-initiated calls because of COVID implications as well as restrictions that were put onto us by OSHA, as well as administrative rules from the state of Oregon. So that's kind of why you see this anomaly that there was a big drop. And the same holds true in regards to our response time because we weren't doing a lot of calls, we weren't doing a lot of self-initiated calls. 2020 you could see was a drop. But in 2021, as we got used to COVID and we started easing restrictions, our call volume started going back up, and we started seeing an increase in our response times. So if the police side of the house, if the levy passes, we will add officers to reduce our overall response time. Again, have the ability, like on a fire, to respond to more than one call or one major call at a time. Additional community policing and crime prevention activities would be able to take place, as well as additional training. We really this past year focused on our soft skill training, such as de-escalation and understanding bias and a lot of those other implications. And also to improve our recruitment and retention. As an agency, we want to make sure that we are viable in regards to being an attractive agency to come to for new officers, as well as laterals. And I think at this part, and you get to speak.
Great, thank you, everyone. Parks and Recreation does play a role in the levy, and just to give you an idea, Parks and Recreation not only runs the aquatic center, but it also runs all of the parks in town. And we're always developing new parks and looking for new recreation programs to offer. Park acreage will increase from 158 acres to 169 acres in this upcoming levy period. And in those parks, our park amenities, we count everything: slides, swings, jungle gyms, everything. And those park amenities currently are at 68 and will increase to over 83 over the levy period. Last summer, we offered the first ever Summer of Fun Youth Recreation Pilot Program. It's such a big title, right? This was a one-time recreation program that was offered to Forest Grove youth. It was funded by the Forest Grove School District through a grant. And it was an 8-week-long program. We served 5,547 attendees. And they attended 65 different programs during that time. These photos here are of the children that participated in some of the programs, and it was completely awesome. If the levy passes, we do look to add part-time staff to maintain the additional park space and amenities. As I said before, this includes trails, playgrounds, sport courts, etc. We also are hoping to keep our momentum going from that summer of fun recreation by building a recreation division within Parks and Recreation and add a coordinator that will allow the city to establish a really meaningful program that offers recreation programming year round. Miss Colleen.
Well, very briefly, I would just tell you that since the pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, we've had to sort of reassess everything we do at the library, how we do it, why we do it. We did that during the pandemic. We started by closing the library for a few months till we figured out what library service was going to look like. And as I've been sharing, lots of libraries, in fact, most public libraries are doing exactly the same thing we are, which is to try to figure out post-pandemic, and I should stop using that term. I think we're transitioning to something different. But as patron behavior, patron usage of the library, as we become increasingly knowledgeable about that, we're just starting to see people come back to the library and we're still offering curbside service. That's been a very popular service and we're going to continue that. During the pandemic, when the building was closed, we established a whole bunch of new partnerships. Those are shown here on this slide. We also developed a lot of new technology. So many of our programs now are offered digitally, live streamed on YouTube. And we've had great success with that. Lots of people taking advantage of that. And we did a survey recently and asked people if they would be glad to come back into the library for programs. And some said yes, and some said no, and some said they hoped we would continue offering live stream programs. So if the levy passes, we're going to expand all of this. The outreach we've been doing, we partnered with the school district as well, just like parks, and had excellent programs in the parks this last summer. Partnered with our parks department to have some excellent programs in the parks. Had a lot of kids get a lot of free books paid for by the Friends of the Library. So our goal, our aim, is to continue to evaluate how we're providing libraries.
No. You don't need to do that.
That's a commitment.
Take that little bit.
I'd be glad to come back to Rotary someday and talk with you about that because we've seen some pretty dramatic changes. And I was just talking with Chuck about our volunteer program. Right now, we don't have a volunteer program because Chuck's a long time volunteer for Levy. And right now, we don't have a need for that. Business has not returned to normal. So again, if the levy passes, we're going to expand our outreach, be out of the library more, recognizing that people want and need us to meet them where they are. And that could include some additional, we just opened our podcast studio. And now the library has regular podcasts. Our teen library council has grown from 5 members to 14 members, and they're doing a lot of really good work. Next time you're in the library, check out the teen area and what they're doing. We're making big changes to the teen area as well. So I think that's all I have to share. Thank you.
So at this point, we'll open it for Q&A. This is another slide, how we will recover and what it passes. So time for Q&A. Yes.
Back to the fire department. It appears that you already have 2 fire engines. You got 813 and 422, because they run past my office every day, almost hourly. So would the levy buy you 2 more engines, one to be at Station 8 and one at Station 4, or are you just going to buy more and put them at Station 4?
Thank you for that question. And there's a testament to how much we're running our calls, right? So 813 is Cornelius, 422 is Forest Grove. So this levy would not fund any new vehicles per se. It would fund staffing for 422 and or 421. or 423, depending on how we decide to provide that staffing. It may also staff the truck, and it may also staff the rescue. So we have a number of vehicles in the firehouse, and we're talking now, our senior staff, about how we want to staff those vehicles on a daily basis if the levy does pass. Yes.
And aren't you partially paid by the city of Cornelius? And so what coordination between this levy and that levy is going towards your salary specifically and outfitting another engine at Station 8?
I think I can answer half of that question. Yes, the fire chief position is partially funded about 33%, 25% by Cornelius. It does not fund any service from the fire department. There is some funding that passes through from the rural district in Cornelius, but that goes to Cornelius Fire Department and City of Cornelius. Maybe part of the answer to that is that there is what's called mutual aid. So it's essentially a boundary drop. We don't make any bones about whether the fire is on this side of the street or the fire's on this side of the street or whose district it's in. Years ago, that may have been the case. And I know it has been the case in jurisdictions across the country. And more, we are dropping boundaries. They call it a boundary drop. And the closest unit is decided by AVL, automatic vehicle locator, that's in one of the computers on the fire engine. And whoever's closest would get that call. That's how it's decided now through dispatch.
My last question
Yes.
for you, Chief, is the fact that you made the comment that TBF&R is down to 95, so they're going to be looking to swallow up somebody else. So they've already swallowed North Plains. They could be looking at Banks. They could be looking at Gaston. How are they looking at Cornelius and Forest Grove? What is the long-term future for those two firehouses if TBF&R wants to be the biggest gorilla in the county?
Well, thanks. So I've spoken to Chief Weiss, and there's been no discussion about swallowing up Cornelius, or Forest Grove, or even Gaston for that matter. And what I was referring to a moment ago about the 95%, that benchmark, really doesn't have anything to do about taking on more departments. It has to do with figuring out why the service is declining. And the example was at TDF&R, why the service is declining there, and it's dropped to 95%. And the fact that because it's dropped to 95%, they're trying to figure out how to fix that. And it may include staffing. I really don't know what they're going to do to provide the fix. But we're using their benchmark as an industry standard at 95%, and we're at 83%. And again, well beyond that industry standard, where we in Forest Grove need to figure out how to provide better staffing so we can respond to all of our calls and get back up beyond that 95%. Yes.
Might be a follow-up question. Has anybody looked at the impact of inflation on these numbers? And we see old-fashioned inflation coming back. How's it going to affect the?
When we did the 5-year projection, we put about an average, probably about 3% inflation per year into the projection. So right now, that's one of the things I look at every day. We're looking at 7% last year. They're saying maybe 8 to 10% this year. So who knows? But a lot of that ultimately for the city depends on how does that work into wage increases. A lot of our costs are just wages. And so just because inflation is 8% doesn't necessarily mean wage should look at 8%. So no, that's why when we're doing this levy, we tell people we would look at adding firefighters, but it's all, everything is based on the projection you set it at. So when inflation continues to say 7% in the next 4 or 5 years, that's going to affect how the city will actually implement the levy as fast.
It might look a lot, but right
Yeah.
now it's pretty scary.
And right now, I'm looking at it and looking at the equipment increase prices. We have an internal pool where we own our own vehicles and we gas charges. Some of the departments are going to look at their equipment rental charges, make sure we don't own them. But it's further, it's what's happening, of course.
Okay, but this is gonna be for Chief Ryman. I wanna go back to your slide number 13. I'd like you to expand upon two items that you didn't cover in your presentation. And if I sound like I've been listening to confirmation hearings, I apologize. But I would like you to expand upon, Chief, what de-escalation and mental health response training is, and how much are you losing out the back door that you need to improve your employee recruitment and retention?
Those are loaded questions. So in regards to the de-escalation of mental health training, there are a couple programs out there that we have participated, want to participate together. One is a 40-hour class that we try to get all our officers in, and that's basically de-escalation techniques as well as dealing with our mental health clients. As you can tell, that the whole issue with mental health, addiction, and issues, livability issues, not only in Forest Grove, but across the metro area have increased dramatically. A lot of legislation changes, especially some that happened in a short session, will impact the way we do business. And again, some of those have unintended consequences. After 110 passed, we've seen an uptick in drug use, as well as more homeless folks coming out to the west side. Again, as most of you know, I spent 31 years over at Hillsborough. We definitely dealt with our homeless population there that, again, migrated from Portland, and now we're seeing a lot of that migration. So a lot of our calls now are emphasized on those type of responses. So we try to increase the type of training we do to handle those type of calls. The other question was beyond the de-escalation of training was.
Why do you need to improve your employee retention? How much is going out the back door that I'm paying for to train up to be in a squad car?
So we lose maybe one a year to other agencies. We lost one officer a year ago, actually two officers. But those officers, they're new, so the agency that recruits them has to pay us back. So if they're not past the 3-year mark, they have to pay us for training wages and those type of things, and equipment, they take equipment. So one of our officers, we knew we'd lose her at some point because she grew up in Midville, convinced her to come back home, and she went there, but again, the Midville covered the cost of her equipment, training, and so forth. So it's not a big thing, but again, for stability reasons, it's nice just to have long-term retention. And then we're going as a city, so I think that's gonna stop after a while, because again, I think we're going up a little over 2% a year, Paul. And as we go bigger, we'll offer more amenities. One of the big things I tried doing since I got here is offering auxiliary type of duties, maybe that's in the county teams, like the hostage negotiation team, as well as rapid response and those type of things. So we're trying to participate more on a countywide basis to keep that retention. Yes, sir.
I just noticed recently you hired an officer from Portland, I believe. You're seeing a lot of people coming out of that agency.
Yeah, we were lucky to pick that officer up. He's a 10. I know Hillsborough picked up like 3 or 4. County picked up a handful also. Yeah, we kind of lucked out in some ways that, again, nothing wrong with police staff at Portland, as you all know, as being active in Forest Grove. Politics in Portland is a whole different beast. And so a lot of those officers left because they didn't feel the support and are going to other local agencies. I don't know if we'll see any more leaving Portland at this point. I know Portland's working hard to keep that exodus from happening. Let's talk more again.
A comment and 2 questions.
Okay.
First of all, to the fire, how many of those, how are you doing on simultaneous calls? I didn't pick that up in this.
As far as the numbers.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know. I don't know what the numbers are. I have to look that up.
More than you want or less?
Oh, definitely more. I don't have the exact number. We have it, I just didn't put it to memory. And it's definitely more. Again, when we see our an increase in call volume, that's going to take away from our ability to service our own calls. That's the reliability and availability piece. There's also distribution and concentration. But there's 3 things: distribution, concentration, and reliability. And we're looking at the reliability piece right now that's affected by the increase in call volume.
Okay, thank you. Please, Chief, first of all, I'll make a comment that I've gone through this particular thing here and crossed out a lot of ifs and put when, because I'm an optimist. And so when the levy passes, will you be able to continue a thing called Citizens Academy?
Absolutely, we're actually looking at doing Citizens Academy right now again, because we just went on that hiatus because of COVID. So that was more of a COVID issue than a staffing issue, so actually Lauren and I are already working on that Citizens Academy.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yes, sir.
I don't have a question, but I just have a comment.
Would you like the microphone?
I was in banking for about 30 years and in the Eastern Oregon. And I found that by far, Forest Grove was the best city I've ever lived in. And I had one experience with the fire department. I have a neighbor that was up in years, and she was bound and determined she was going to stay in her house and not go to any place where her daughter wanted to go. And she got to where she'd trip and fall. Well, she had an alert button around her neck, and she pushed that button. And then they, in turn, would call the Forest Grove Fire Department. And sometimes it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and they would come and get her up. And never said a word about it, but they did this for at least 3 or 4 years.
Thank you, Chief.
No, I was just say thank you for those kind words from those guys, and I want to say something about my colleagues here, because they are excellent partners. We're trying to do a lot of things together. We're trying to improve our training together, and that's one of the few relationships I've seen in my career that are close to the fire police. And going back to TVF&R, plus of course, I have a lot of friends that work for them, do not have the same relationship with their counterparts on the law enforcement side, like in Beaverton, Clackamas County, and other places that they're at. So, great relationship by having their own fire department. Thank you.
There is one shortcoming with the staff here, Ann, and Colleen, and Henry, and Jim. They cannot advocate during their workday, so they gave you a boatload of information. I, however, can advocate, and I will. And I want to thank Richard for his comments about when the levy passes. It is significantly important to the future of the city of Forest Grove that we keep pace with what we're trying to do and what we're trying to do for the residents of this city and beyond. We work with, in the city, we work with people who live outside the city as far as our rural fire district is concerned. We work with people outside the city as far as our light and power company. We have an area that serves beyond the city of Forest Grove and that. And we also serve some areas outside the city with water supply. So those are the kinds of things that Forest Grove serves, not only the people of Forest Grove, but also the people of Western Washington County. And it is extremely important that we continue to do that. I pay about $1,500 a year. No, my wife and I pay about $1,500 a year in property taxes for the city of Forest Grove. That comes out to about $4 a day. That comes out to about $2 a day for Chief Ryman's shop. It's about $1.30 for the fire department, for Chief Garing's boys and women. That's a coffee a day. The return on your investment there is, I think, very significant. The return on the social investment is significant. One final story and then I'll shut up. During the pandemic, I had the opportunity to watch a Zoom presentation by the Forest Grove Library. Nicholas Picola is an author from Linfield University, and it gags me to say Linfield University, but I will. Who wrote a book called The Fire is Upon Us. And it was a history and a discussion about the debate between William Buckley and James Baldwin at Cambridge Union in the late 1960s. Very significant debate, very significant discussion about the future of this country and about the future of Western civilization. And I had the opportunity to ask questions and to talk with Dr. Picola on that particular situation. That doesn't happen in every library everywhere. So we have those kinds of opportunities. If you get a chance to go out to Anna and Abby's yard at Rogers Park, that's not an opportunity available to every kid. That's Forest Grove uniqueness at work there. And part of it is due to the work of Ann and her predecessor, Tom Gamble. So when you get the ballot in the mail, mark yes and send it in. You don't even have to put a stamp on it. Yes, sir.
Can I, if someone wanted to put up like a yard sign in favor, is that something that's?
There are yard signs. I am going to plead ignorance on where they are right now, but I'll get your email and I'll get your phone number and I'll find out. Thank you all.